You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Star Trek movie, Star Trek Insurrection. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, be sure to stick around. We have more of your great listener feedback to share at the end of the show. But first, I want to tell you how you can get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt. For those of you watching the video, you can sort of see mine there.
You're hiding behind the microphone as it should be, Dom.
I'm hanging off the back of the Enterprise on that one. But you can get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt and other merchandise with the wonderful original art on it by visiting sqpn.com/merch. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are certain to enjoy called The Secrets of Doctor Who, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Doctor Who. But today we're talking about Star Trek Insurrection. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of this movie?
This time, Picard and the gang are drawn into a tense situation when Mr. Data goes berserk on a planet of space hippies that the Federation and a creepy race known as the Son'a have been studying. They eventually capture Data and learn that he went berserk because he was injured by a Son'a weapon, and his survival and ethical routines took control and gave him safe mode multiple personality disorder. While in safe mode, Data held the Federation and Son'a crew members hostage and told the space hippies that they were their enemies. It turns out Data was right. The Federation Council has authorized Admiral Dougherty and the Son'a to remove the 600 space hippies from their planet using a holodeck ship so that they won't realize they've been relocated. The reason is that the rings of their planet have a miraculous property that will stop and reverse aging, and the Federation Council wants to use it to help billions of people. However, harvesting the miraculous property will kill everyone on the planet, hence the relocation. Picard bizarrely decides that the Prime Directive applies in this situation, and he decides to commit an act of, here comes the title, insurrection. He sends Riker, Geordi, and the Enterprise to make contact with the Federation to alert them to what's going on here, even though they already know. And while that's going on, he and the rest of the bridge crew stay on the planet to insurrect and help the space hippies. We thus get long scenes of the crew and the space hippies trudging through the California mountains seeking shelter. However, the Son'a eventually are able to beam up most of them, including Picard and the woman Picard has conveniently fallen in love with. Picard then reveals that he learned from a DNA scan that the Son'a are really the same race as the space hippies. The Son'a had tried to take over the space commune a century ago and got kicked out, and they now need the miraculous healing property to heal themselves for some reason. And they're looking for revenge. The Son'a leader sends ships to intercept the Enterprise, which is forced to eject and detonate its warp core so it comes back to the planet. The Son'a leader also orders the Collector for the miraculous space healing property to be activated, but Picard tricks him and his bridge officers by beaming them onto the holodeck ship, where he has somehow miraculously created a hologram of the Son'a bridge. However, the Son'a leader beams over to the Collector to activate it manually, and Picard also beams over to destroy it before it can destroy the planet. Picard succeeds in destroying the Collector, and the Son'a leader dies screaming. Afterwards, Riker informs Picard that the Federation has ordered an indefinite halt to the space hippie relocation project while they review the situation, and Picard and the gang say goodbye to the woman Picard fell in love with and all the other space hippies. The end.
So, before I get your overall impressions, there's just a few interesting facts I just want to throw out there. Today, as this episode of Secrets of Star Trek releases, is the 25th anniversary of the release of this movie, which was...
Oh, that's funny.
Completely unintentional. It's just a coincidence, which is really fun.
Wow. I remember seeing it in the theaters with my dad.
Yeah. I remember going to the early matinee. I would go see Star Trek movies as soon as they were out. It's directed by Jonathan Frakes, who plays Will Riker, of course. Written by Michael Piller, who was famous for being a writer on, I think he was like an early writer on Next Gen, but then went to DS9.
Yeah.
When Next Gen ended.
He quickly moved off of DS9, though. He was only there in the beginning. He handed the show over to Ira Bear.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then
which is when it got good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's it. Father Cory, what your overall impression of this movie?
It was, if it had been a TNG like 2-parter, it would have been okay. Of course, because it's a movie, they had to amp up the humor, and some of it, in my opinion, fell really flat. It was just kind of ridiculous. Cringy. It didn't really fit. Yeah, it was cringy. Some of the scene of Worf basically going back through puberty was kind of like, we don't need that. Data, of course, trying to play the humor up with Data's character. Just that's I didn't like a lot of that, of course. And then there was the space hippie aspect of it, but it wasn't bad. It just wasn't great either. It's just kind of kind
of there. Yeah. How about you, Jimmy?
Well, they dropped the numbers after Star Trek VI, but the rule holds true. This movie has 2 serious strikes against it. The first one is this is the 9th Star Trek film. And as everybody knows, the odd-numbered Star Trek films are inferior to the even-numbered Star Trek films. So it's going to be inferior for that reason alone. It's also going to be inferior because Riker shaves his beard in this movie. Yep. And as everybody knows, Next Gen is only good when Riker has the beard. In fact, it's led to a TV trope being named after it, whereas jumping the shark is when a TV series starts to get bad compared to what it used to be. Growing the beard is when it starts to get good compared to what it used to be.
Because beard good. Well, the 3 bearded guys.
At least in the case of Jonathan Frakes for Next Generation purposes, yes. So it's, in my view, this is a really mediocre film.
Yeah.
It has a serious, not only does it have cringe moments, some of which are meant to be humorous, but they're still cringe, which we'll talk about. But it also has a ridiculous core element, a series of ridiculous core elements. But the big one is Picard leading an insurrection over thinking the Prime Directive applies here when it clearly does not.
Yeah.
Right.
And applying it over one commune of 600 people who aren't even the totality of their race, as he learns.
Right.
So it's just a ridiculous setup, which became clear to Michael Piller when he showed a draft of the script to Ira Bear. Ira Bear is a really good writer. And Piller recalls how Ira came into his office, and Ira was known for always wearing sunglasses. And he comes into his office and takes off the sunglasses for like the first time ever and says, Mikey, it's just a ridiculous premise. Also, right. We'll get into why it's ridiculous, but it's a ridiculous premise.
Pillars famously said that he came up with the idea for the planet where people get younger one morning while he was applying his Rogaine, which is used to be a hair growth thing.
It still is, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you never hear about it these days.
Well, there's new, of course, it's a generic brand now.
Oh, okay. Well, as far as my overall impression, I'm in broad agreement with you. There are elements I like. I kind of like some of the dumb humor, the cringy stuff. I laugh. There's one in particular that I laughed out loud at, which I'll get to. But the settings, the locations, awesome, amazing. Is that the Sierras, Jimmy? Do you know if that was the Sierra Mountains in California?
Some of it looks like it, where they show the mountain lake. Sure looks like it could be.
I think that may have been Mammoth Lake, but I may be mistaken on that.
Oh, okay. Because gorgeous, I know that setting is it makes up for a lot.
It's definitely not Vasquez Rocks. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
no, it's not. And so that, but there were a lot of there were even more. You were generous, Jimmy. There were more logical errors. In this that we could get to. I think F. Murray Abraham was, as a scene chewing villain, is great. I think that was kind of I liked him in that, and he gets to be the villain screaming at the end as he dies. So that he was pretty good in that. But in general,
he screams okay.
Yeah. But Father Cory, I think you hit it. I think I agree. This would have been a pretty good, decent two-parter in the series.
Decent. I won't give it pretty good. I'll give it decent.
Decent. It would have been an okay two-parter, which they kind of did a little bit. Well, we could talk about Who Watches the Watchers had a similar beginning premise, which they've essentially recycled.
Oh yeah, there's several episodes that have premises. I even made a list of them. I'm not sure how quick I can find it, but I made a list of the previous episodes that this recycled elements of.
Yeah. Who Watches the Watchers, though, was the clearest one, just because it was, okay, they didn't learn off that problem, so let's do it again.
The duck blind.
Yeah. Also, the Iceman episode where Data goes, has a memory problem, and in another primitive culture, that's called Thine Own Self. And also the let's transport people using a holodeck without them from a primitive culture without them realizing it episode with Worf's brother, which was called Homeward.
Yep.
Right. Yes. All recycled elements. One other thing I should mention that I think is just an interesting note is this is the first feature film to have all the visual effects be CGI, which you could kind of see. There was some primitive, it looked a little, some of the space CGI was a little primitive, but
it wasn't the space CGI that I noticed. It was the space hippie child's pocket puppy.
Yeah.
There was clearly that there were some elements.
There were a few places where like a modern PS5 or Xbox One game would have better graphics.
Yes. I mean, he just shows its age. This is a 25-year-old movie. But
I don't hold that credit. I don't hold that against it though, because they just were working with what they had at the time. Just like you watched the 1960s Star Trek, special effects aren't great, and neither are the sets.
Yep.
Right. I think it's an interesting historical note of the movie. The setting in the setting within the Star Trek timeline, this was in the midst of the Dominion War. DS9 was still running, Voyager was running at that time. And so then they had to get Worf off of DS9 again and back into the movie, like they did in the last one in First Contact. But this is in the midst of the Dominion War, and that kind of plays a very small part of the motivation for why their Federation Council approved this is because they're desperate about the war.
They want more people to help them fight the war.
Right.
Yeah. This is in the final season of DS9, so it's the end of the Dominion War when things are really bad.
Right. So the themes, if you want to talk about it, like there's a whole theme of the two sides of humanity. I mean, this is kind of you talk about space hippies. We have the idyllic and innocent, beautiful people living simply in tune with nature. And then the ugly, diseased, high-tech, evil, jealous of their, it's a Jekyll and Hyde sort of thing going on. Heavy-handed. Yep. Very heavy-handed. I'm not sure it would be done any better today if they wanted to do something like that, but.
Well, and then they don't have quite the idyllic, because it turns out that they actually do have advanced like warp technology and things like that, and they just keep it under wraps. They have it and they use it. They just keep it under wraps.
Yeah, the space hippies clearly have to. I mean, they don't say it, but they have to have high tech, because there's no way 100 years ago that the rebels could have been kicked off planet if they didn't have it.
Right.
And they had to, and then they used their tech to conquer two other races, which are their slave class, the Tarlac and the Allura, who we see in the backgrounds. But if it's not like they just had knowledge of tech, they had to have the actual technology, because you can't build starships without high-tech industrial plants, and you can't build high-tech industrial plants without low-tech tools. And you can't have low-tech. You can't ramp up in just a few years from no tech to functional starships.
Yeah.
So they got to have them. They just got them in caves or something.
Well, and then they mentioned too where they know all these high tech principles and all these particles and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, you don't just know that you had technology way back when, but you have the knowledge now of that technology.
It kind of reminds me of the,
and it's not just the knowledge though. They have to have tech in order to make tech.
Right.
Because you could have, if you dropped an Apple engineer in the middle of a desert with nothing but sticks and stones, he couldn't make you an iPhone in a year.
Well, it could be that they just had their old ships that they used to get there hidden in a cave somewhere that the rebels took off.
Well, they don't even really say. Yeah. I mean,
no, they don't even say. But the idea that we don't have machines. I was just watching you operate a dam and an irrigation system and all these machines. They're just lower tech. I mean, come on.
Yeah, they're just not electronic.
Yeah, you've set like this bar like this is this and no further for technology, and that's always how it is.
Well, that's kind of what Amish do. I mean, Amish have machines. They just don't use certain higher tech ones.
Right. That's true. That's true.
Even that is kind of limited what they do. They do have some modern vehicles and things like that. So,
another theme we have is the temptation of the fountain of youth, or put it another way, sort of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, if you want to use a Christian metaphor. Whereas, we have this temptation, these people have this, whatever it is that keeps them young, healthy, and they can live for hundreds of years. They're sort of like the elves of Rivendell. They even come across that way a little bit. And this temptation of others to take it from them. We want to take it. And so there's an interesting theme within the movie around this idea. Like the higher tech people come in and they want to take the specialness of the people who are less powerful than them. So the little truth to power thing going on there. And that kind of culminates in what is essentially a metaphor of Native American forced relocation. To me, that's what it comes across as to me.
Well, and many other cultures that have faced that, not just Native Americans, but that is something that has happened many times in human history. And they even kind of, poke at it in the story where we've not learned from this in the past,
Right.
This also leads to one of the key problems with this. So according to the Federation Council, the Prime Directive does not apply here. And the Federation Council is absolutely right. Because number one, the space hippies know about and clearly have warp technology. So it doesn't apply for that reason. Also, they're not native to this planet. They're not naturally immortal. It's not like the universe determined that you're going to grow up on a planet that's going to make you immortal. They moved here, and that means this planet is a resource. And the law has a concept that no one ever mentions in this that in real life would be used to handle this issue. The concept is eminent domain. Eminent domain occurs when someone has a piece of property and there is a compelling reason that property needs to be used for another purpose than what the person wants to use it for. And you can compensate the person and take the property. And this is used all the time in, like when a district, let's say, needs to build a freeway or some other, some other thing, and it's going to have to go through somebody's property. Well, you pay them for their property, and then you claim their property under eminent domain so you can build the freeway that will benefit the entire community. Well, that's essentially what we have going on here. They're living on this planet that has rings that could benefit billions of people. So you would not sneakily move the people off their property in the middle of the night without them realizing it, which is stupid. You just go to them and say, I'm sorry, but you have a valuable resource here that can help billions of people. Can we work out a deal? And if they say no, then you say, okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to relocate you, but we will offer you compensation. And if they had been handling this the way we would in real life, we wouldn't have a movie.
Right.
And so they have to handle it stupid.
Well,
And Picard then suddenly decides the prime directive seems to apply here when it clearly doesn't.
Right.
And his best analogy is the forced relocation thing. And okay, yeah, forced relocation's bad, but eminent domain is essentially a small-scale forced relocation, and that's what they're talking about here. We're talking about closing one commune and moving it to another planet that'll be just as good, and we can compensate them for this planet.
Well, but if they've got this miraculous radiation that keeps them young perpetually, they've got the fountain of youth. Exactly how much money would it take to convince someone to give that up?
Well, you don't have. That's the thing about eminent domain. You don't have to get the person's. They don't have to agree to the compensation you offer. It just has to be. It's supposed to be reasonable, and they can continue to benefit because if we're going to use this to benefit billions of people, we can use it to continue to benefit the space hippies in their new commune.
And there's also the just as good, which you won't have because you'll have to use these artificial injections or whatever. However, you get this radiation into people, then. But no, I agree with your point, but it does end up still being the forced relocation,
right?
Unjust forced relocation.
You know, I feel like Pillar unintentionally or intentionally puts a line in the script that really outlines the problem with some of these TNG movies, which is he has Picard say, "Remember when we were explorers in exasperation?" I wrote
that line down too. Precisely, yeah. Picard gets in the elevator with the next gen crew on their way to this diplomatic reception, and he says, "Can anyone remember when we used to be explorers?" And it's like, yes, I can, and that's part of the problem.
Yep,
right.
There's also another line where I think the problem with this story really shows through, which is where he's talking to Admiral Dougherty, and Picard needs to come across as Mr. Righteous, you know. So he's chewing out Admiral Dougherty. He's being insubordinate, but he's saying things like, you know, tell me when does it become wrong? If you're saying it's okay to relocate 600 people, what does it take for it to become wrong? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 1,000,000? When does it become wrong? And if I'm Admiral Dougherty, I would have turned that around and shoved it down his throat. When does it become okay, Captain Picard? When it's 500 people? When it's 100 people? When it's one person? When can you relocate somebody? And it's just we're arguing over numbers, and as if that was a determining factor, and it's just not. At some level, it's okay to relocate people. It's not a huge humanitarian tragedy if you invoke eminent domain. You shouldn't do it badly, which our government often does, but it can be done in a reasonable way.
I mean, yeah, Picard's got a complaint. It's the way that they're doing it. It's not the fact that they're doing it, but he's got a valid complaint. It's the secret in the middle of literally in the middle of the night way that they plan on doing it.
Which is also stupid because even if you relocate people, oh, by the way, they never explain why they have a cloak on a holo ship.
Yeah.
This is technology violates the Treaty of Algeron.
I have that note.
Should not be a Federation cloaked ship in these circumstances. But if you do have a cloaking ship and you with a holodeck in it and you take them to a new planet and you plant them on the new planet, you know when they're going to realize they're on a new planet? The next night. Because they're going to see the stars and notice the constellations are all wrong. And so, because people who live in low-tech societies watch the skies and they don't have television, they're going to look at the skies and notice what the stars are doing and use it for planting their crops and stuff like that. And you just screwed up their whole system.
Well, it's going to be actually the next morning when they wake up and notice the geology has changed. And of course, by that time, too late. See ya.
Yeah.
They're warp 9 out of there. So
yeah, I didn't get why the ship had to be cloaked anyway, except to make a funny, thing because they've hid it under a lake anyway. So it's not like it's where anyone's going to stumble on it except Data.
Well, apparently did. Someone did. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then you have the creepy Federation spying on people from duck blind things, which is just kind of like, this has always been creepy. Even when TNG did it and Who Watches the Watchers, like this. How would they build this hidden outpost without anyone noticing? It's literally like it's like an observation deck in a zoo, looking at the creatures. It's right there.
I know how I do it, but I don't know how they did it.
Knock everybody out and then build it?
Well, that's one way, but you could also use transporters to transport out lots of dirt from inside that mountain, and then you just need to slap on the holographic interface at night while nobody's watching.
Yep.
Right. I guess that would be it. But you'd have to do it pretty darn quiet, not to wake anybody.
That's why I'd use the transporter.
And then the whole idea that you have individual cloaks, which is new, of people walking around cloaked in the village, and no one ever bumps into anyone. Or
I have in my notes, how are those Invisi-suits not leaving footprints?
Right. Yeah. And then, of course, eventually they start, when they're chasing Data, they throw everything up out of whack and they start running into stuff. And I guess it doesn't matter anymore. They're still trying to stop him. You're running into people. At this point, you might as well take it off and just, you've revealed the game here.
You mean you never just tripped over your own 2 feet and got thrown back 5 feet in the process? No.
Yeah. Had my market stand blown up.
Yeah.
Data's safe mode multiple personality disorder also seems stupid.
Yeah. Why would that be the sort of the default? I get default, at his fundamental level, ethics routines are there to prevent him from being used to do bad things. I get that. But this is it is a complex idea to decide that it needs to be, that he needs to take these actions as the default safety mode of some sort.
Yeah, it's like, why is his regular conscious mind not able to do this for itself?
Yeah.
Well, and you would think that if he has a safe mode like that, I mean, yes, ethical subroutines should kick in, but you would think it would be flight mode. It'd be get to safety, figure out what's going on, get yourself fixed, don't hurt anyone along the way.
Which is actually what we saw in that Brothers episode of Next Gen, where at a distance, Nooney and Sung activated Data's safe mode in order to bring him to him.
Right.
And he was just very focused on this one purpose. He's not trying to hurt anybody, but he is trying to get to Dr. Sung.
Right.
It was interesting characterization of Picard early on, before they get to the Briar Patch, the area.
You mean when they put the little girl beaded pigtail headdress on him?
Yeah.
Among other things. But they have this super competent Picard thing going on where he's the exacting captain with every detail at his fingertips, right down to a 0.03 variance in some sensor field, whatever, on the bridge, which nobody can believe that he could actually sense it. What's the purpose of that except to buff up Picard?
I thought, and this could be a script artifact because it occurs in the middle of a sequence of things where we don't know the reason yet, but the crew is starting to act strange. So, and they're becoming younger. And so Troy starts flirting with Riker and Worf oversleeps like teenagers do. And then he's got a pimple. And then Picard hears this tiny misalignment. Well, young people have better ears than older people. They can hear higher frequencies, which in fact is used against them because there is a device known as the Mosquito that is used to discourage young people from loitering in places. So if you've got young people loitering in front of your shop, you can put in a Mosquito. It will create a high-pitched screeching noise that they can hear, but that your adult customers can't, and get rid of the loitering teenagers for you.
Yeah.
But were they even in the Briar Patch when all that started?
Yeah.
It was just when they first got there.
Okay. I forgot the sequence of events, I guess.
Jimmy, and Geordi is also starting to get his eyes back, so his ocular implants are bugging him at the moment.
Right. Jimmy, I know what your favorite part of the movie was, though.
You may think you do. Let's see if you're right.
Is it the Gilbert and Sullivan singing?
No, that's one of the cringe moments.
Okay.
So at one point, they're Picard, Worf, and Data are flying, and Data's in safe mode, and they're both flying on essentially shuttles, and they're trying to talk to Data, but he's not talking back to them. And Picard deduces that his rational mind is disengaged. So even though he's not wearing his emotion chip, let's try singing Gilbert and Sullivan to him. And so he gets a karaoke version of a British tar so that Worf can follow along. A tar is a sailor. So the song is about a British sailor, and it describes, what he should be like. His brow should furl and his lips should curl and so on and so on. And his fist should be ready for a knockdown blow. And so what I like about that is how it gets set up, because Picard turns, after he's made this decision to try to reach Data's consciousness through an alternate route, Picard turns to Worf and says, "Mr. Worf, do you know Gilbert and Sullivan?" And Worf says, "No, I have not had a chance to meet all the new crew members since I returned." That is a great line.
That is.
That is a great line. And then he puts on this karaoke version of a British tar from HMS Pinafore, and he turns to Worf and is like, "Sing," and Worf is shaking his head no, and which is what one would do if one is not either a singer or familiar with this song or things like that. And so that's okay, but then the actual performance of a British tar with Worf and Picard and Data singing it is kind of cringy.
My favorite film version of a British tar is in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Sala sings it after being kissed by Kate Allen's character, Marion Ravenwood. Yes, because he's all excited by that. It's where I recognized it from. So from there, I guess we could talk about, the rest of the film, but Starfleet seems to have a lot of rogue admirals running around, and that seems to be
another bad admiral plot this time.
Yeah, it's a flaw in a lot of, not just the movies, but even in the series, as we keep running, in TNG at least, we keep running into these rogue admirals doing bad things.
Well, this is a bad admiral, but he's not really a rogue admiral, because he's actually got the Federation Council's approval for what he's doing.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
And he's not an utter bad guy. He has limits. He keeps trying to restrain the Son'a leader, much to the Son'a leader's frustration, and eventually the Son'a leader kills him.
Yeah,
because he's at a certain point, it's like, okay, the Federation admiral is like, we're going to pull the plug. This project is over, and it's at that point that the Son'a leader kills him.
Because the Son'a were deceiving the Federation about the nature of their relationship with the Baku.
Right.
And that's where the admiral sort of ends up drawing the line, especially given that whatever the Son'a is going to do, they're like, we're just going to kill them now. I'm done with that.
And he gets plastic surgery to death.
Yeah, right.
The Son'a are like war criminals of war criminals. They're like every possible war criminal line they can cross, they'll cross it.
with vim and vigor. So the couple other thoughts I want to just mention. The line that I thought was funny was after Riker gets his beard shaved and Data's been fixed. Data notices that you've shaved your beard, and he says, "Smooth as an android's bottom," and then Data touches his cheek, and it just kind of does the head shake.
Yeah.
It's great. There was a line, and Brent Spiner thought it would be better to just do the expression, which I agree. It was great.
He refused to say the line, but
Yep.
No, it's not.
I did think it was funny.
There's a number of the humor they tried to put with Data, I could be a flotation device, and he floats up to his waist in the water, which was just kind of like
that was another good line. In the event of a water landing, I've been designed to serve as a flotation device. That was good. That was good.
I like that.
There's also a nice bit where they first wake Data up out of safe mode, and Geordi's taken certain problematic components out of his positronic brain that have memory engrams on it. And they wake up Data and say, "How are you doing?" And Data says, "I appear to be missing several memory engrams." And then Geordi just opens his palm in front of Data's face, and Data says, "Oh, there they are."
That's another one I laughed out loud at. That was good. Yes. So another element that we have here, which seems this random insertion, is this whole concept of the one perfect moment, the single perfect moment in time, where time seems to stop. Although apparently on this Baku planet, it does.
Mhm.
This seems like an odd insertion. What was this? Do you think was this a native aspect of the Baku? Something to do with the planet? I mean, what was that about?
Well, but then the way they show it when she's hurt is it's not really stopping time. It's just you lose awareness of time. And somehow, like, she's hurt, so her biology slows down or whatever, so that they can then get to them. Because they go from them stopping time, and all of a sudden, Dr. Crusher's doing the hypospray.
The sand falling from the ceiling slows down, and
it's inconsistent because if you perceive things around you as slowing down, you're actually you're mentally speeding up. Yep. And so that would make the time between when you get injured and when Dr. Crusher gets to you seem longer, not shorter.
Right. Yeah, that was it was an odd insertion into the whole story, and I think they wanted it to be part of the love story aspect.
It's just given Picard and Anij, that's the woman's name, something romantic to do.
Okay.
And they didn't have to have the special effects because I'm sure all of us have had our times where instead of losing track of time and time flying, we're so focused on the here and now that it does seem like time doesn't go, or we're bored. Time seems to drag,
Yes, yeah. I've been in those meetings. So, we do get to see the captain's yacht. We mentioned last time, previously on the season finale of Lower Decks, we rarely see the captain's yacht in use. Well, this is the other time we actually get to see the captain's yacht in use.
And I was mistaken. My memory was that its name was the Calypso after Jacques Cousteau's ship, but no, actually its name is the Cousteau.
Right. We get a Calypso later. I think it came up. I forget what it was, but we talked about the naming, and we do get a Calypso later. So the let's see, just trying to think of like any other things that I wanted. They're using the poetic. Using the holographic ship trick against the Baku, the trick that they were going to use. I mean, against the Sona, the trick they were going to use on the Baku. I guess that's. I mean, Darty gets a little, like you mentioned, he gets a little bit of a redemption, but he does descend to further depths because he gets to a point where he okays the destruction of the Enterprise, the flagship of the fleet. This crew, which has saved the Federation and the universe multiple times, but he approves or okays that destruction, and that's the ultimate betrayal.
I don't know that he approves it being destroyed exactly. I think they're kind of deliberately ambiguous on that. He approves sending ships to intercept it, knowing that conflict may result.
Right. Okay, yeah. Any other thoughts on this one, Father Cory?
The only one is Sochev, the leader of the Baku, male leader of the Baku. Looks familiar if you've watched 80s like action, grew up with 80s action series. Daniel Hugh Kelly is the actor's name, and he was Hardcastle of Hardcastle and McCormick. If you remember that series.
Gosh, that's a throwback.
Yeah. So that's it's like it's like, wait, he looks familiar. Oh yeah, I remember that series long time ago.
How about you, Jimmy? Any final thoughts on this one?
There's a bunch of stuff I could nitpick at, but one thing that was nice in this is I think for the first time in Star Trek we had drones in combat. Where the Sona are using these drones to tag people so that they can be beamed out of this environment where you normally couldn't lock on to somebody. And so these drones are flying around shooting people with little darts. And our heroes, therefore, have to shoot them and smash them when they're gun jams and things like that. And having drones, they're a part of combat now.
Yeah.
And so having drones in combat is a good development for Star Trek.
How'd they get those transport inhibitors all the way up the mountain ahead of time?
No. It's because of a mineral. They say there's a mineral that inhibits, and they also are using transport inhibitors for where the mineral isn't present.
Right.
But this opens
they have
up,
them on them.
this opens up another plot hole, which is, well, why don't you just beam them as close as possible to this area so you just have to then walk into it instead of trudging all the way from the village?
Because it already was a short movie. It was, like an hour 45 with credits.
Yeah.
So they had to expand it a little bit. So at least the actual story was an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So
also one thing that I was annoyed by is there's this scene where Anej, wow, is she hardcore flirting with Picard?
Oh yeah.
There is a moment where she turns to him and says, "I wonder if you're aware of the trust that you engender." And it's like, wow. That's almost Take Me Now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Would you trust me to take you out to dinner and get a cup of coffee?
Yeah. So, wow, that was coming out of the blue. That is an incredibly suggestive line.
She's 300. She knows what she wants.
Well, I guess so.
More than 300,
Yeah.
But then as they're walking along, this is at night, so it can be romantic. For some reason, there's like a quilt on a stand in the middle of a colonnade they're walking through, and Picard fingers the quilt for like half a second and says, "Extraordinary craftsmanship," and it's like, dude, it's quilt. I mean, if you want to say something is extraordinary craftsmanship, the audience needs to see it in bright light, not in shadows like this is. But it's only just a quilt. There's only so much you can do with a quilt. And
you just ticked off all the quilt fans.
Hang on. Hang on. You can do impressive stitching with a quilt. But there are many very skilled people who make quilts. But how you could glance at it for half a second and come in the dark and come to the conclusion that it is extraordinary craftsmanship.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And it pops me out of the story because, clearly this line is just inserted as a setup for Anij's next line, which is, this is made by apprentices. They'll be mature craftsmen in 40 or 50 years. And it's like just to show that everything is so much better on the space hippie planet.
Well, I should tell you sometime about the time my wife dragged me through a 2-hour exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts of quilts.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm not denying that quilts can be very impressive, but not the way they've set this up.
I did a lot of, that's a ninice quilt. That's a nice quilt.
And Lower Decks kind of called it out, the planet, the ring planet that was controlled by the computer, where it's like, this art looks awful. Oh no, that's our good ones. This is the ones we're worried that aren't going as well.
That must have been a callback to this. That is funny. One other note I should mention is that there were some deleted scenes where
with Quark
and Rom would have been, or at least Max Rodencheck, but Quark would have been on Baku for some reason, vacationing there.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a weird.
Yeah. Well, and Max Groencheck was supposed to be an ensign, an alien ensign.
Right.
But
so, they got cut. That's too bad.
Something else that got cut at the script stage was originally the planet was going to be inhabited by 10-year-old children. So the space hippies were all going to be children. It would be like, and the children shall lead or something.
That would be awkward
the romantic
for the
plot.
Hopefully so.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Anyway, any other thoughts, Jimmy? Anything else?
Nah.
Okay, let's get to our feedback then. And this feedback comes from our, as we mentioned, the Lower Decks season finale that we just talked about. This one was called Old Friends, New Planets. And the first feedback comes from Eric, who sent in an email. He said, I think the most appearances of a single Trek character throughout all series is Will Riker, a total of 5.5 times. And he says, hear me out. Obviously TNG, but he had a cameo in Voyager. He appeared in the series finale of Enterprise. I know, Father Cory. He made appearances in 2 seasons of Picard. He's also appeared on Lower Decks. That's 5. But the half is his appearance of a Thomas Riker on DS9, because partially he was playing the part of Will Riker. Thomas Riker was pretending to be Will Riker. So there's the half.
Yeah.
Q is the next closest with 5 appearances, 5 different series, but he did not make an appearance in Enterprise. So we can quibble on the technicalities of Thomas Riker's appearance on DS9, but Q and Riker have a 5 series arc. They've been in 5 series, even better than Worf.
So Dom comment about, I know Cory is, Father Cory, I was joking about how, there's this fan fiction episode of Enterprise. It really wasn't part of the series, but it supposedly has Will Riker and Deanna Troi, and kind of joking about that the final episode of Enterprise never actually existed. It's just kind of one of those things you pretend it doesn't happen.
So, but I think, we were talking about in the Lower Decks episode about whether Will Wheaton may have shown up in the most series, but
or
clearly
Michael Dorn.
Or Michael Dorn, right. But clearly Riker and Q. I should have thought of Q. Yeah.
I think it's still Michael Dorn in terms of being a main character.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you could say that yes, Riker shows up in the DS9 episode, just it's his transporter clone.
Right. And then like Michael Dorn as Worf's grandfather in Star Trek.
Yep.
What's
6 Undiscovered Country.
Undiscovered Country. I was trying to remember that. Anyway, then the other feedback we have is from Flying Car 100 on YouTube, who wrote, "Would the Mark Twain thing actually work?" That was we're having 2 people dress up as Mark Twain on a riverboat on a holodeck and settle their differences by Mark Twaining each other. Never the twain shall meet.
I think it depends on
discussing
the people.
Issues over whiskey in a night, like sitting on a nice riverboat like that. That sounds congenial. We could handle that.
Yeah, limited amounts of whiskey.
Limited.
Otherwise, it could lead to fist fights depending on whether people are happy drunks or angry drunks.
Right. Yeah. I'd like to see it tried anyway, but we'll see. All right, thank you for your feedback. We do appreciate it. And so to wrap things up, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Julie L., Blair N., Sarah S., Patrick M., and Dawn B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. What did you think of Star Trek Insurrection? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there as well. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Next Generation episode, The Big Goodbye. Until then, speaking of holograms, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
And a big goodbye to you too.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, in the event of a water landing, I have been designed to serve as a flotation device.